Hello, and welcome back to the Being Very Tired and also Animating Occasionally channel, right? So today, we got a question from my one of my students um, to help them with like a animation loop. And I noticed that this is actually, I assume, a trend of an animation that I've been seeing going around. So let's get into it. Let's figure out how to make it better, how I can help you with that, and even just like how to do it from like start to finish, probably. So let's get into this over here. I really got to get some like interlude animation. Why is it the little camera thing here? Can I do this? No, I can't. I'm not gonna bother with like any other stuff. So, anyways, here it is right now. So we're in Toon Boom Harmony right now. I don't recommend it, especially as somebody learning animation. Starting out, it's very expensive and very complicated, and it's in an art style that people don't really even like anymore. I see a lot of people talk about that they don't like the current kind of sitcom-y style of animation. Anyways, all that aside, it's what I got, so it's what we're working with. Can ignore that because that's gonna not be how most things work unless you're in like 3D. And let's just look at it. First of all, so it's meant to be a loop. I've just brought it in. Oh, it's like playing a lot faster in here than it was as a file. Oh, I'm sharing my whole screen. That might bite me in the butt. So let's, but in this case, it's actually helpful because you'll be able to see. I thought it was playing at a different speed. Oh, it's in here. Yeah, here you play slow. It's only 1 second of animation, but it plays slow. So it must be set to a certain frame rate, I guess. I don't know. But it's not a standard frame rate. I don't even know if I can like see a frame. Yeah, 8 frames a second. So don't do that. Right off the bat. The standard frame rate is 24 frames a second. You could potentially go 12 frames a second and do every frame. Thus being kind of the standard frame rate that you might see for like television, which is it's 24 frames a second, but we hold each drawing for 1 frame. What if I put this one on? This is the one that's supposed to be in the corner. And now I'm locked. So I'll put it here. And it's camera sucks, dude. It's not doing me any favors. Get out of here. So if I use this one, but then it's like really big. Oh, you're also locked. Get little. It's the only time that shift doesn't maintain ratio. It's really like breaks it in this. And then we'll go to my Insta link because that camera is a little bit low range, and I'll just fix that. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep. Ah, boop. And that way I can get my face all the way the hell out of here, yo. And I guess that'll just stick around. So anyways, as I was saying, this is at 8 frames a second, and this is like clearly her intention for the timing. And to be fair, the timing is good for like the intention of how far to go. The first couple things I'm noticing, actually, so one thing I want to point out here before I get into just like critiquing it is that it's surprisingly like pretty anatomically correct, but it's like kind of chibified, so it's really uh generic to generic's not really like the word I'm looking for, but it's just like the forms are all ambiguous, maybe. yeah, the like anatomicness of it is like ambiguous, but that's fine. It's not necessarily like wrong. It's just what people do when they're starting out. The timing is quite good, and I'm impressed that you have what's called like leading action or follow through on the arms. Because if you notice, like the arms are straight. I'll like try to act it out, and I'll go into like full screen. If you you can't still really see my arms, but if you're like swaying your arm like starts straight, and it will be while it comes down because your elbow can't go anymore this way, right? Like I can't bend this way. It only bends this way. But as it comes back, it will like lead. So this part is sort of ahead, you might think. So it's not going to just be flat. It's going to come down, but this is all going to trail, right? And so it's going to trail, and then like this will get there first, like first, so to speak. It will get into the ease out, as it's called, or as I call it. I actually like think I very deliberately say it the opposite of how it's like meant to be intended, but it seems to make more sense to me. The ease out, so it slows down at the end of its movement, and then the rest is still like catching up. So you get like this sort of thing, right? If you like look at the top, it's pretty much already done moving. And then you get the rest like still kind of catching up, and the hand will probably be like the last thing in that chain. So this is actually one of the first things you do in animation as like an animation practice project. It's usually a seaweed, a swinging seaweed, and you're doing aspects of that in the arm, and it's just nice to see that you're kind of just defaultly doing it without realizing. But you are doing essentially just keys here, right? You're doing extremes, is what they would be called. And that's fine. That is really like the process. You would start with keys. There's two kinds of animation styles, and like arguably a third, but the third is a mashup of the other two. There's key animation, which is what you're doing here, and that's like planning your extremes. It's like, I know I want her to start here, right? And I want her to finish here. That might be two extremes, and you got to figure out what's in between those drawings. And so I would say all of what you have here is basically extremes, because you're also articulating that, oh, there's going to be some points where I want this to bend as it comes over, and I want her to rotate as she goes from side to side, like her body rotates, right? So we see one side of her head and we see the other side of her head. So that's like key animation. And the other style is called straight ahead animation. It's not really what you would want to do for loops or anything like majorly structural. But the benefit of straight ahead animation is and its methodology. Let's just say like what it is first. Straight ahead animations where you start with like a drawing, and then you do your next drawing, and then your next drawing, and you are animating not keys, but literally the next drawing. Like, so if you're doing 24 frames a second, you would do frame 1, you would do frame 3, right? Because you hold the first frame for 2, then your next new drawing is on frame 3, you hold it through 4, next drawing's on 5, and you keep going like that. So it's called straight ahead because you're literally working straight forward. And the benefit that has is it has like a much more organic, naturalistic, and like complicated like physics and acting. You know, it's very nuanced because you're figuring it out on the fly, and you'll go like, oh, but this is going to start leading behind, and they start tripping a little bit, but like as they trip, they're like flailing over and all these things. So it becomes this very nuanced complicated, like realistic kind of design and animation, but it's basically like a shot in the dark, and it's not really well, like try it, but like I wouldn't recommend it as a place to start. But basically everything is a place to start when you're starting out. So the benefit of that, it's very organic, complicated, naturalistic. Keyed animation is something you'd want to do for something like this, where it's a loop, because you know where it has to end, and where it has to end has to link up with where it started, right? So in a loop animation like this, you want them to start one place, go to like point B in their animation, and then return, right? So you have two extremes, but in a sense you have three extremes, because you have to return them to the starting position. So you might want to take your first pose, whatever that be, and copy paste it to your end position. And when everything is said and done, you will remove that frame, but you will need that as a reference point up until you finish. And you'll see when I start to like get into this, I'll give you an example of that. Or do I just like do that right now? But the idea being that you'll have that reference point of that final key and that final pose as how you're gonna get there, right? Because keys are all like, oh, okay, I want to start here, and now that I know that frame and I know I'm gonna end up here, I can start to find those in-betweens where the character is like, right? And then ends up in that next pose. And you need that to create the hook, right? To create it looping back on itself to its starting position so that it can like play infinitely, so to speak. And so once they're there, now you know, like you have that reference point of the starting position. Now you can do the in-betweens using the reference of like, right? And then when you're done, you remove that final frame, because if you don't remove it, it's playing it twice. When the loop starts again, and if you've left it in, you have that first pose, and then you have that first pose again when it starts. And so you've like double exposed it, and you've left that frame on screen for twice as long. Is there anything incriminating in this folder? No. No. So yeah, let's like get into it a little bit more. So this was on 8 frames a second, and this is natively doing, oh, why is it? Okay, I thought it was at 60. This is natively doing 24 frames a second, and that's like what we want and what I'd recommend still, right? Because you have it at 8, but the reason why we don't do it at 8 is because like it's just like not a timing that will exist and that you could do anything with, so to speak, right? The best we could do at 8 frames a second is have 8 frames of drawings in that second. And there's only so many drawings I can fit in there, right? I can only fit 8 a second. You're just gonna need more than that if you're gonna want a better movement. So keep it to 24, or if you wanna just like make it simpler on yourself, you can do it 12. You can do it 12 frames a second. But I would recommend keeping it at 24, because that way you have some like wiggle room to potentially add even more drawings and have your animation be on ones, which means 1 drawing per frame. Theoretically, having 24 drawings in that 24 frames of video, right? But like you don't necessarily need that. You're getting away with a lot already at 8 frames a second. So, right, the persistence of vision, which is why where this frames per second concept comes from, is that we as humans basically have 24 frames a second vision. And so we the illusion works at that rate, and it can work slower, but it just gives you room to work with. So yeah, let's like get into it a bit. So I'm gonna have to like break this up, and I'm not really sure. I'll probably just like redraw it to have the frames at my disposal to kind of use, because I can't interpret this footage to B24 or whatever, and I don't really want to fiddle with how I'm going to go about doing that. So right now I'm in kind of like a pencil tool. Let's go to my tool properties. I just want to like draw over, like do a draw over. I'll have this brush be like a bit bigger just because I don't want to deal with detail. And for now, I'm just going to copy these frames. So just bear with me for a bit while super interesting things are going to happen and I just make your drawing worse, because I'm not going to bother with like detail per se. So we got the front of her face here, and you got the implication that she's like got like a rotated, like a tilted head. I'm not going to bother with her hair and such, or even her collar, I don't think. Torso. I guess she's meant to have like an upside down heart on her chest. Got shoulder. Let's say we got her chest. Anatomically, we would so one thing with like the shoulder and turning is it goes like across. That like makes any sense. Your shoulder doesn't like stay in place. You don't turn like I turn. My shoulder doesn't like stay there. I'm actively trying to keep my shoulder back right now in order to get what you're doing. But if she's moving her arm across, you can see the shoulder goes in front of the torso. Right? And I'm not even rotating my body right now. It's already like moving across. And then there's the rotation of the body. So if she's rotating her body and moving her shoulder across, then her shoulder should be like in the center, because her whole body has rotated to like a profile position. And so you'll actually see more of the difference of the upper body to lower body, like the pelvis and torso, because from a front view, the torso, if we like break it down into kind of a box form, and the pelvis as well into a box, just because that's a nice way to understand the three-dimensionality of those two forms, right? And your spine would be like here, and then that's almost definitely like too long, or these are not wide enough. And then you would have like the neck and then the head to some degree, right? Proportional, notwithstanding, because depending on the character, and your character is like a kind of chipified character. So in the front, it'll look like that. But as you go into a profile view, the upper body, this is why boxes are so nice, because you get to go, oh, definitively, this is, we're looking at the side plane of the torso. And the pelvis will be something like this. This is, I think, too exaggerated. Something like this. But they work in contrast to each other, and it creates this S shape in the spine from the head through the torso, you know, and through the pelvis. You get like this S shape. Right? Why am I like explaining all this? Because we can use all this to articulate, you know, clarify to the audience, the people seeing this animation, oh, she's rotated to a profile view in her body, because we know this. And so in a front view, a person might look very like a straight line. I would suggest almost always avoid having a character being like perfectly straight like that, and try to find like a line of action where they're kind of tilted in some way, in some S or C shape way, because it's just more interesting. They are therefore one way or another. And it's just like more interesting than straight on, which kind of gives like no information. You know, it's the equivalent of a T posing 3D character. It's not giving, right? She's not giving. And so you're gonna want that. So, anyways, all that said, like maybe I don't particularly want the shoulder to be like all the way over there. I'll just like keep it a little bit off still. And so that way all of this is articulated as like this is the side of her body, and then this is what remains of visually what we see of the front of her body, of her torso. This is an up shot of her torso. Do I want that in terms of like perspective? I don't even know if that's going to matter. I'll just keep it like that. Boop, bap, boop, boop. All right, so we'll do that as thing, and then her kind of pelvis is like kind of ambiguous in the thing, but we'll figure that out as we go. I'll just keep it kind of a cylinder. So pelvis, it's also really important in animation, like muscles and whatnot, you can kind of get away with because characters wear, like baggy clothes, and a lot of starting artists definitely put characters into baggy clothes as to like hide their knowledge of anatomy, like over top of the clothes. And that's all fine. That's just like a psychological thing that like all artists do. I definitely did when I started. It's just like, oh, I don't know this. It's the same thing with hands. It's like, oh, I don't know how to draw hands. Oh, the characters are always like mittened or wearing long sleeves or have their hands in their pockets or behind their back. It's like, it's subconscious or conscious. Honestly, it's been so long that I kind of forget. And then we can do this like three-dimensional box thing to her head as well. And then this way we have a very deliberate understanding of where the side of her head is, where the front of her head is, are we seeing the bottom, and so forth. And it just lends itself to being able to do animation, because animation is an illusion where you are conveying 3D information on like a 2D plane, the 2D plane being the piece of paper or what have you. And so by boxifying everything, you can rationalize it in your head. So anyways, that, and then her arm will like come down and over. So already I have to start thinking about like the planning. So her arm's gonna come over, and I have to think about like, where's that extreme gonna be? And I don't think I want a straight arm. Acting it out yourself is also a huge benefit. You don't necessarily need to like have it on video and like reference it, said video, but that does help. People have done that throughout time. For animation, you've probably seen a lot of videos for it. It's obviously helpful, especially when you're doing like nuanced acting, or even just trying to learn something from life is always good. But I tend to just like do it and kind of like observe what my body is doing and how like it feels in a sense, because I'm kind of taking like mental stock of what my body is doing as I do it. So her arms are coming over. I guess they're supposed to be like, it like goes behind her body, and that's like really confusing to me. I don't really understand how it goes back like behind her body. So while this goes here, then it goes that way. You know what? I think you're actually missing an extreme where both arms have to be out. I'm not sure how the trend goes or whatnot, but if you're going to, I can't go more over, the wall is here. But if, and like I put the camera over there, let me put the camera like over again. This is gonna be tedious as hell. Okay, So, okay. So if still hitting the wall. So if they need to go like this, right, and this arm is like needing to go opposite, I think you need this in order to go back. Because if she's like this, like you go from here, it's like not how you move. Does that make sense? If I'm doing it like this makes sense because you go out and then I can use the momentum to go and swing and also use that momentum to swing this one in the opposite. But if I don't have that middle position, then this arm goes out. I can't, like I'm having to actively think about, oh, this can't, like I need to hide the other arm. So like, or actually like this arm. So as it's coming back, I have to think, oh, this arm has to actually disappear. And now this arm has to disappear. And like, sure, it's not impossible or what have you to do that, but basically I am still doing that regardless. I'm still going out and over, out, over, out, over. So is that in there even? Am I just wrong? Yeah, you're missing an out, right? She goes or she starts to go over, and then you just snap to the reverse. And you've snapped to the reverse too early is really what it is, and you're missing that you needed that at all. This way. I need to go this way. Okay. I should really just turn on the tracking for this. Ugh. I'm having a bad hair decade, and so so we need that in between, or we need that like middle extreme. And so here, so this is an annoying thing about this, but I don't know why it's not defaultly extended. Who's wanting one singular frame of animation? Hold it until I tell you. Anyways, it doesn't matter. And so when I'm first like planning things out, I don't need all of this anymore. When I'm first planning things out, I'm not bothering with timing so much. I'll get into timing in a little bit. Like you'll see what I'll get into timing in a bit. But when I start out, I'm going, I know I need at least these extremes. And then I start to time it out in terms of just what feels correctly upon watching it, which is probably how you did things when you did this and why you turned it to 8 frames a second. But instead of 8 frames a second, I keep it at the 24 and I just like move the frames around until it feels right. And that feeling is going to be different for like different people because maybe you want snappier animation, maybe you want it kind of like longer and more. It's kind of a personal up to personal taste. So for the sake of like harmony, I don't remember what my button is for this. Is it this one? Yeah. So there is like a make a new blank frame, but is it this? And something you're going to want in any animation program, this is a super fundamental basic thing. I could not work if it didn't exist. And in Toon Boom Harmony, it's this button right here, and it's the onion skin like mode or tool. It's not like a tool that I use, it's just like a thing you put on, and it allows you to see other frames, your before and after frames. So if you see here, I have little brackets, and it's basically saying how far back it's going to give me reference images and how far forward I'm going to see reference images. This is not actually on screen. You can see I can't actually like manipulate it. If I go to the eraser, I can't actually erase this. It's particularly confusing right now because I drew in red and my before frames are red, right? If I drew something here and I went forward, you see that my forward drawings are green. And they're actually quite opaque because I think my settings are just set that way for it to be very opaque. Usually it's a little bit transparent, and I might have to change that because it might get confusing. It almost definitely will get confusing, seeing as I'm drawing in red. I want my little footstool. So all I wanted with this next frame is to really just like give myself a note that she's going to start here, go into a middle position, basically like a neutral position, and then flop herself the other way. And so for right now, it's just going to be like a reference image. Maybe I do need to draw this and not red because I am going to get extremely confused. Draw her box body. I feel like that is not how wide you'd want her to be, and certainly her torso should not be so big comparatively, right? Because like I can't quite tell where your like anatomy kind of lies on this character, but I think her chest is actually here, which would put her pelvis. And like this stuff is important regardless, right? You can have a chibi character, but this is always going to be important because, for instance, where should her knees be? What is a mini skirt when the pelvis is an ambiguous concept? You know, it's not a mini skirt anymore. It's like, I don't know, a belt. Or, I don't know, knee socks. I don't know what weird metaphor I'm trying to make here. All that to say is like, you know, if her pelvis is here and her torso is here, then now I know proportionally, relatively, where her knee should be and this sort of thing. So if her pelvis is there, presumably you have her, well, it's not like I'm doing like much anatomically correct stuff. Girls have like slightly bigger pelvises, but basically at a bone level, humans are indistinguishably different. So we'll say something like that. The rest is like meat, you know, it's like fat and meat and muscle that really like differentiate us at the sex level. And so we'll see the front of her head here, and so we'll boxify that as well. And then I'm going to have this little depiction of the bottom of her head. Something of a neck. She'll probably have kind of a thick neck, but I can't tell. You've hidden it behind a scarf. So I'm just assuming that proportionally she's going to be kind of a chibified. Chibi's like a weird term. There was a point, and I feel like they still use it, but like really mostly it's kind of a translation error. But it's like super deformed is what like chibi will be written as on like box and whatnot. And it's surprising that, you know, they've not gone after them for that shit in this economy. So anyways, front facing, and I you know, in the style of animation, or like for the purposes of this, she is going to have a pretty straight line of action because this is like a neutral thing between two poses that we're going to want to be able to cycle back and forth from. And the two sides are really like the same pose flipped, likely. And so the middle pose, being this, is going to be a neutral center. I say this because I was just making a point of like never do that. But in between extreme poses will tend to lend itself to being this like middle point because it's a middle point of the exact same position that are like flipped, right? It's gonna create like a perfect center situation. And so her arms, we can do like balls for shoulders is a pretty good basic to do. And so what I like to do with the anatomy as far as it goes to, I don't think I want her shoulders to be like, though we like reference torsos being like this box shape, I don't, you don't like particularly want to do that because like they're not, right? If you notice, there's muscle here that goes down, and what we think of as like the box shape is really like your clavicle, which is like your bone. What is the like normal term for clavicle? But your bone here that goes across your shoulders, and then your shoulders, and that creates a very boxified effect, and that's what we think of when we kind of like square off the upper body. But really, there's like muscle up here and then shoulders. So I don't want to put the shoulders, on top of this box. And the reason why we do these like box forms is because the deltoid, which is your shoulder muscle, is kind of like egg shaped. It's kind of a ball, but it actually comes down. So it's more of a tear shape like this, or heart. But you rarely see this kind of interior muscle, so you see it more like this, with a flattening at the top because it's actually got two starting positions. So we boxify the torso, head, and pelvis, but you want to keep the arms as cylinders because it's just like an easy breakdown of it. And for here, we're going to want the arms to be out because that's just like a good extreme for them. Making the arms like too long. Again, hard to tell. Arms, it depends on like where your pelvis is, right? If the pelvis is here, your arms go like just including your hands, if I include the hands and fingers and stuff, they go like just past your hip. So if we know that the hip is here, the hand and the arm in its fullness is going to be going to need to arrive just past this pelvis point. So the arm will need to be about that length. Good. Every single thing is calling me right now. Okay. So that will research that needs to go about there. So that's going to be like hand position. And so mid that is going to be upper arm, lower arm, and then we're going to have those be cylinders. And just like with being a box, a cylinder, what's best for even like doing the cylinder, like, above and beyond kind of stuff, is having them taper towards the end. Right? So you get like a ball, and then like, let's say a ball again. This is like a very basic way to get the anatomy of an arm, though this should be a bit shorter, and the lower arm should be a bit longer, and like a ball for the joints. So this way you get like your deltoid. In a more advanced set, you can get like a deltoid in there. This is where the bicep is. That comes down, ends in this nook. And there is a muscle, depending on what angle your lower arm is, there's a muscle that goes from the side of the upper arm. So you get this like divot, but like the lower arm actually like comes up higher than the divot. Like this is where my inside elbow is, but then this muscle keeps going. And the bicep also like visually ends like surprisingly early. So you get this like divot. And that's because this muscle here comes up into the side. And you get this kind of divot in here and then out again. Your lower arm is actually two bones, and they have the potential to crisscross themselves. So depending on the angle of the arm, it could be a flat, big lower arm because they're perpendicular in this way. But if I do this, the bones are actually crisscrossed at the end, but they've remained the same at the beginning, right? There's no rotation here. The rotation happens at the end. So here, they're perpendicular. So they're parallel. It's the opposite. This way they're parallel, and this way they're perpendicular. We're not perpendicular necessarily, but they've crossed over. So you get these two bones, and then if the arm crosses over, this stays the same, and the other one crosses over. So their like starting positions are still as they were, but this crosses over. And so you get like a wide arm, and then you get like a shortening, like the width of the arm kind of goes away in that rotation. It's like I'm just kind of throwing that out there as like you'll learn it as you learn it, but you don't necessarily need this right now. It's just I'm trying to give you some sneaky info here. And we can keep the hand as like a ball for now, but it would be, the hands are notoriously the most complicated thing to draw. Mittens are like a pretty good way to break it down, but what we do for hands and feet is like we basically treat the middle two fingers as like one finger, and this is why in cartoony cartoons they only have three fingers, because the middle two is often just simplified to be something like this. And then you can get the pinky, the index finger, right? You just and treat them like boxes, and treat them as though they only have one joint. One joint. Like ignore this. Only do this one. And that's because like this is such a specific thing, as though to communicate next to nothing. And so, thinking in like an efficient terms, 80% of what we can achieve and communicate is done so with like this knuckle, and then this is like a detail that gives nothing. I can't even like give an example of like what would be good there. Actually, I could, but I'm not going to. It just complicates things. And as for the thumb, that's where like things get crazy, because there's like a muscle here and a bone, but then it goes out. And still, I just keep this as two, as one, two pieces with one joint to simplify it. And there's like a lot of things that could like make it work better, but I think that will kind of suffice. And when you're drawing hands, try to think of it as like a gesture, like draw it as a whole as much as possible, and have it work at that level as a whole, as a silhouette. Don't be like, oh, I need to draw a hand. And then I don't know, another one, I guess. This actually turned out surprisingly all right, which is kind of going against the general idea. But you want it to work as a whole. When you're working at like, oh, and then it has a knuckle, and there's a thing, and there's another thing, there's another thing, there's another thing, there's another thing. You're just going to get a mass of little things that's just going to look bad. Be basically doing mittens where you're trying to get like a nice collective like hand drawing or what have you. So if you're doing like a fist, like find a shorthand for your hands, ironically. And so that way you'll know that it works already as like a shape, and then you can like put the details in it. That's just generally true for anything that you're doing. Do a big shape and worry about those big shapes more than anything else. The like hip bone actually like comes off the side of the hip, your femur, I mean. And again, like, yeah, I'm not really sure where the character's like anatomy is, or even like how they're meant to be standing. I would like to have her legs like a little bit far apart because it's just like more powerful and grounded. Um, like as a, I don't know how to like phrase this or what have you. There's a general thing around posing women where they purposefully make them weak and small and frail, and it's deemed feminine. And so you'll get characters like Mercury from Sailor Moon, where her knees come together and touch, like her knees come together, right? And they go as far as also to just like have this like line of action on her that's like, and she's like basically like looking like up at you and what have you. They got like super huge craniums. But my point here being is this is like a very like destabilizing like pose, and that's on purpose because they're like, oh, so girly, so feminine, and it's like, okay, but like, can she stand where she's not breaking her patella? But anyways, rant over. It's just a thing. So you can do that if you want. You can like bring her legs in, her knees in. But I tend to do like an empowering thing when I draw. Well, when I draw any characters, because I just think it's cool. But as an almost specific note, as somebody who's done magical girl shows, worked on magical girl shows, I try to do like, hey, can I like what would actually be cool for little girls? Because I'm not trying to be like, hey, you should be this way. I'm trying to be like, hey, what would inherently be cool? I just like even doing like kind of chitties. I like to be like, what did I do? Yeah. I like to do like beefy, chonky characters because it's just cool, like Mega Man esque stuff. That's probably not like what you're after here, but that's what you're gonna get. What you gonna get? So something like that. Like, knees relatively here. Some hips. From this angle, people tend to draw the the hip, like the side of the hip and the leg, like they don't do this kind of separation, and that's because that the muscle is like rarely defined in that way. Like in women specifically, because women tend to hold fat in their hips more generic, like more as like a general thing than men would do on a kind of consistent basis. And so there tends to be like a flattening here. And so this separation isn't really there. And that's why like people tend to draw like really, really long legs for women and kind of just assume like, yeah, that's how it's anatomy, right? And it does look like that, to be fair, at times, right? Like if someone's sitting down, you're gonna get like this thigh and butt that's all coalescing and looks basically like it's one big, shape, right? But really, like the leg, as far as the femur goes, is here, and then this is actually like the hip, butt, shoulder. Yeah. So they're I don't even know what I'm trying to articulate there. Just, yep. I tend to draw. There's like an annoying thing a little bit about like this program, but really more about my methodology. I draw in a very like sculptural way in that I draw like a lot of line and then I want to like sculpt it into like exactly the shape that I want. But that's not how the line tool works. I should be using a brush for sketchy lines. But really, I should just use the line tool and like properly use the line tool. So I'm trying to create just kind of like an interesting design here for her where she's like a smallish like upper body and then hips and like strong leg. Just because I find contrast to be an interesting character design thing, right? Contrast is just inherently good. It's a design thing rather than it like because otherwise you're just going to get a character that's like effectively a box, right? Because it's like same shape all the way through. They're effectively a box. But if you like differentiate those shapes, then you get like something interesting. And it's where the concept for like a lot of the cartoonification of things like comes from, right? So like big old baggy jeans and whatnot, maybe like a crop that belt. I just did Kim Possible on accident. Kim Possible. It beat me. Something something. Oh, you want to reach me? Kim Possible. Anyways, back to the thing I was trying to explain like an hour ago, which is tubes. Drawing is just a series of tubes. So again, I'm tapering it just to say the tops are going to be bigger than the bottoms because that reflects more organically what you get with muscles, which like, well, they start and stop like small, but they quickly become big and slowly become small. And you get this like, so everything kind of looks like this at a muscular level. They all kind of look like jalapenos. I'm sure that's what we said that. I'm going to Mexico next week. They're gonna fuck kill me for doing that shit. So, anyways, arms out. I think it would be nice too if I don't know. It'll kind of depend on how fast the character is moving. But because I'm trying to like analyze where my uh, hands and arms are at. You're here. Okay. So what I'm gonna want a bit of is actually bringing the lower arms in a bit, only so that I can have the lower arms have like a little bit of an angle. And technically, this shouldn't be possible if we were thinking of the arms as being like in this direction. I can't have this bend anymore this way. But what's happening is the arms are actually like this because we're in a forward position, right? You can see this angle is different than this angle. And that's happening because my elbow isn't bending in that direction anymore. It's doing this, but we're in a front view. I don't know that makes any sense. Basically, the elbow can bend at the angle that we're at, and that's just going to let us. gonna be the downside of her. And she's gonna have like chibi hand. She can do with a little mitten. I probably only need to draw like half her body, and then because like the two sides should mirror. I like to have like a pinky up kind of a situation. I'm not trying to make any kind of a good drawing at this point because I'm just really just like leaving notes for myself to be like, this is the general position I want things to be at, but I'm gonna, you know, do all the floof later. I do kind of do too much on the anatomy side, especially since like a lot of this is gonna get hidden. And so we have all that, but I think you have her where like she's got a mini skirt, so let's assume it goes to like about here. Because you're doing like a mini skirt, that's as mini as it's going to get, and then a really low or a really big and baggy sweater on top of that. So this becomes that kind of bottom rung, which is going to be more cinched to her form and shape. Right, so probably we'll keep that literally like right up against her because it's going to act as like a hint as to what her actual anatomy and whatnot is like. And so if you have a baggy sweater, what's going to happen is all that weight is going to come down and droop over top of this like waistband, because the hip goes forward, right? Like I was saying, it tips a bit forward, and then there's like stomach muscles and such, and then the torso. So this is, I think, exaggerated, but just to like articulate the point. So a baggy sweater will likely go along with that, and the cinched part of the waistband of that sweater is going to be at the same angle, and the sweater is going to all bunch up at the bottom like this. Right? And because we're seeing her from the front, what this is going to look like is this kind of an oval, because the cinched band is in front. Right? And like the part we don't see, which is behind her, is going to go up like that. So really we just get like a C curve at the bottom. But because of the sweater like coming down, it's going to go over this edge. So it's going to go out here and then come down over the waistband. So we might like lose a portion or all of like the waistband. And you'll see this kind of effect often actually, where one object goes over top of another object. And anytime you get that, it's like that layering. It creates like a natural feeling of depth. Because you're like, you go, oh, okay, well, that's this kind of form is on top of this kind of form, and like so on and so forth. And you might draw it like this sort of a thing. When the form is like the same color on top of the same color, because that way you can like ignore, and it's good to do so, ignore like what is this line, because it's like already like implied, and it just makes it be a more cohesive whole. Anyways. There's like a whole thing with like wrinkles that could go any like number of ways. It really just kind of depends. And I'll need like the other forms on her to really get that working. So for now, she's got this waistband and the sweater. It's gonna come over said waistband. Because we want the sweater to be like implied thick and like not that she is implied thick, that's where the waistband being cinched to her anatomy is like a hint to that, and then the rest can be baggy and it's fine because like we understand that here where it's like tightest is that hint. And because and like everything else needs to be like kind of equally baggy, so the same thing with like her sleeves, it will be to her anatomy like up here because gravity go down. And so at the top will be her anatomy, but at the bottom will be where it's like a thicker sweater hanging down. And also this like area is what's potentially going to flow around and like trail behind as she moves. So like as I move this way, right? As I move this way, it could trail behind because the arm is moving and the sweater is like slower or being caught by air. So this is something that might change in the flop from side to side, because right now I'm basically making it that she's going this way, and the sleeves are therefore going in the opposite direction. They're remaining behind backwards. And I'm kind of confused what's happening here. So presumably it's just a sweater, and maybe she's kind of grabbing onto like the edges of the sleeve, you know? So in that case, we won't even see her thumbs. And her fingers will be at the ends of her palms, doing like this kind of knuckle thing, grabbing on, but then, you know, tiny fingies. This implication is she little. And again, we're doing the same kind of like thing with size, where where the bagginess like ends here and then the cinched part goes over her hand. Her thumb is going to be like hidden underneath all that. All of this should keep going. Things like the sweater sleeve are nice little, I don't know, hints or cheats, because they're inherently tube-like. Right? But what I like to do when I draw anything that works in this way is don't draw it perfectly towards the edge. So if the tube is like this, don't draw the hole perfectly on the edge like this. Right? Instead, draw it a little bit in, because that way you give like a bit of thickness to the fabric. If that makes sense, right? Here, this implies like that this and that the thickness of this material is like infinitely thin, because the edge goes right to the edge and then goes off, and then like right to the edge. The only thing I could do that is say like a paper cylinder. But when you draw it like this, the assumption is now you've got this much thickness of product. Right? So it, like cardboard cylinder, let's say. And because this is like a sweater, we're going to want like a little bit of that. Think in 3D. Doing all those details really throwing off this whole thing. And the reason I'm doing like making it bigger like this is because I'm thinking, oh, but like where's her thumb at? And so we need some space for a thumb. Even though the thumb is technically like not visible here, because she's kind of doing this thing and like holding on to the sweater that's like, you know, in here. I have like something I could articulate this with. He's like holding it like this, right? Is what I'm thinking as she's doing the thing. And so the thumb is like hidden in behind, or maybe like next to this guy here, actually. So maybe we get a thumb right here. But that's one chonky thumb. That's because I'm using this like chonky brush right now. Maybe I just put some little indications of the... No indications. That's for later. Doing too much. So sleeve, and it's like billowing backwards, but we'll figure out that more like as we go. And so it's gonna billow on this side in this way. Her arms, in my thinking right now, are going this way. We could always like flop her in the other direction or the other way. So I have her bending all of these. And then I like to differentiate the pinky just because it's a little bit more interesting that way. The thumb is like covering this area. And then all of this is sleeve edge that comes down. Something like that. And then because of the three-dimensionality of the sleeve itself, I have it come all the way up here, right? Not this visible edge, because like because like this is a little bit in perspective, so to speak. So if her hand was, if her arm was perfectly like this, even that's like perspective. If her arm was like perfectly like this, right? We'd get the sleeve edge and then like the sweater coming off of that sleeve edge. But because she's a little bit in perspective, as this arm is swaying, you get like the sleeve edge, but it's gonna be visibly like on top of, right, just like this, of the arm. So if we were like to look at it, like if we had a ball and this is the sleeve itself, or yeah, and the cuff of the sleeve is like off the edge. If we were looking at it from the side, like perfectly from the side, you'd get something like this, right? But she's a little bit in perspective, and that will always be the case. She'll always be a little bit one way or another in perspective. And so right now we have it where the cuff and her arm is like forward a little bit, right? A little bit. Like this is an exaggeration, but it's a little bit in this way. And so the cuff is going to be a little bit more like this. right? And because the cuff is like small, because it's like an elastic and it's like whatever, you're gonna get like this big poofy sleeve that is um, behind the cuff. Right? Does that make sense? I can hear you saying that it does, and I love that. And so you're gonna get this like upper part of the sleeve, and then like shoulder, something like that. But I would, like I was suggesting over here with this like fold over situation, I wouldn't draw this line here all the way across. I would have it break up in the center. And so it's still communicating that same thing, but it's not dissecting them as much. Because if I had a full line all the way across, the kind of visual implication is that this is one completely detached, separate object, and then this is another object entirely. But if you have that breakup here, it's now saying, oh, like it's one object, but it's got like aspects to its shape and form. So all that to say, that's why this goes down a little bit and doesn't go here. It doesn't go like right where the sleeve ends, but instead goes a little bit over. It's just to explain, to over-explain perspective. Also just like gives it like some thickness, like the fabric, some thickness and all this. And it could like go more out potentially as well. It's like a artistic kind of thing. And I would do the same thing with her skirt as well. And I would just keep it to like a simplified thing for now, but it sticks to this side of her body because she's moving in this kind of direction or spin. Actually, I'm thinking about it. If she's like spinning, it'll have like a drag. Yeah, it'll drag, but then in this middle position that we're in, it's actually going to like fan out. But she's not stopping in the middle. Yeah, so it'll fan out at the end. Like at the edges. At the extreme points of the animation is what I mean. And then not worry too much about the wrinkles and wrinkles. And then she's got knee socks. Like, are these above her knee? Or are they like thigh socks? Okay, so let's assume that they're thigh. And that we're looking down. So like even as far as I'm going to the thighs, you have straight line, straight line. Impossible. It's gonna be at least a tiny bit one way or another. Like with this explanation with the arms, it's gonna at least be up a little bit or down a little bit, and you need to decide which way it is, because this, like drawing it this way with like a little bit of a curve, you're now describing the form of the leg as having mass. Whenever you draw a straight line on anywhere on a human, you're saying that is massless. It's completely flat. There's no mass there. There's no curvature or roundness there. And the difference of like the choice you might make of, you know, is it up or down, is where are the eyes, right? It's a perspective thing. And generally we have our perspective line at like the character's eyes, basically. And so everything below, because the implication is like there's a sameness there and you're looking at somebody else in the eyes, which is kind of a general neurotypical thing to do. And so something down here will be a down angle, right? If we did up angle, it's implying that we're like down here. by like underneath this, whatever that means, you know, looking up at her. Which, like, if that's what's happening, that's what's happening. But that's a different thing, and I don't think that's what's happening here. So we're going to have this be a down angle, because that's going to give us that like three-dimensionality. And so, like, I'm doing all this kind of drawing, and I'm realizing like probably you still want her to be like quite feminine, and I'm drawing her like really muscular because I like that. So you just want to like articulate all these things a little bit less, but you would still always have this. Like characters are always going to have calves, right? And they're always going to have muscles here. But for women and for how anime draws, because they're massively sexualized to like a degree that is literally studied, then you're going to want to tone down like the musculature and have things just be like ambiguous, really. But it would still exist. You still have like bigger like thighs, and then like a knee, and then the calves and whatnot, and feet. But because she's chibi, it'll be like quite wide, or because she's kind of like a sort of like a child. That's what like chibis are, I think, meant to be, like cute and childlike. So you get like less anatomy. This will be like the cuff for that. You know, and like advanced stuff if you want to just kind of like showcase that this is like, you know, squishy meat. You have this be a divot where the cinch is on the thigh socks or what have you, because that implies like, oh, it's squishing here, and so this like comes out just like a tiny bit, right? Really, all you're doing is like, instead of drawing that line all the way across and then this line, it's like an afterthought or what have you. You just like erase here. So you're not actually making this thicker, right? You're not drawing this like out. You could, but really you're just drawing a divot here. And it's like the same position that it was. Or at least it'll like average off to be the same position like later. The point is you just want like a divot like just there where it's cinching. Because that's where it's like closing and tweet, right? And you might also get it like here, but to a lesser extent. Anyways, not a big point to deal with, but I know people are thirsty to know that, so, and just thirsty in general, you know. And then the knee is going to be like something really simplified on a character like this. You usually get like kind of this like fold in muscle from the top, and there's like a muscle on the side of the knees. But all of that's going to be like massively simplified. Nonetheless, it exists, so it should be there to some degree. And the reason why I'm really like sticking to like, you know, getting the feet and legs drawn correctly is because having that placement of this character is going to be really important to getting this to work. Because right now, as I'm looking at it, it seems to me that she's really moving through the frame, and you can do that, but I'm not sure that that's like the intention, so to speak. Making it, see, I just like this leg more. I'm just gonna copy that leg over. Just the way the way I broke up the muscles is like working better and more interestingly. However, She's kind of super bending her knees is what it's feeling like. Like she's got that thing where you're super flexible and not in a good way. And it's like damaging her knees because they're growing too much. I want like a little bit of bend in the knee there. Have the rest of this just like back. Probably have to change. Maybe too far. Maybe the intention is like legs together kind of propriety. Propriety. No. What the hell's the word that I'm trying to say? This will, I think, work out better once it's cleaned up because the problem that's happening here is that it's so complicated. I've got all these like garbage lines everywhere that it looks bad. But what you want is, for your final at least, just a very clean line look, because that's what's gonna create this whole like feminine cleanness and whatnot. But because she's chibi, I'm like putting a lot of emphasis on, really too much emphasis on musculature. Even in this, I feel like I want to kick out a leg more than the other and give like preference one way. So we will. So, and then even though like all of this is off screen, I'd want to like imply, let's assume she's definitely wearing like some kind of chonk kind of school shoes. Not that that matters because this is like all off screen. But also it really matters. It's like very, very important. Anyways. Something like that. And then be like something like a heel hidden in there or whatever. But the only reason I'm doing all of this is so that I know where her feet are and I keep that consistent. Even though it's off screen, like I said, like keeping that consistency is good. I'm giving her like really big feet, and that's like not really the vibe, but she's chibi. And also it's off screen, so I'm trying to like not care about that. And then ultimately she is going to have like big hair. I just want to like keep that in perspective because for like design reasons. And even like her antenna, that I assume that's what it is because like they're clearly antenna, those would also trail behind. So she's moving this way right now, they would trail behind in this sort of a way. Right? They're like everything is always catching up. And because this is a loop, there's no point that they do catch up, because for them to catch up, you have to stop, and that gives them time to be like, whoa, right? They go, whoa, and then they kind of like vibrate to a close. Yes. Shoes, you piss me off. I don't know why I'm like redrawing you. I should just be able to just make you smaller. You know what it is? It's because she's chibi, which is like they should still have small hands, but small hands and feet, and I have not done that. I'm like quite popular to be like, yo, shoes huge. And to be fair, I do like contrast, so like I do like it, but it's surprising to say anything about it. And so these are meant to be like socks, right? Like I want to keep the consistency of like where the tops are, because even though The skirt is like more up here. Like we're like potentially seeing more of like the underside of it here, and it's more down here. Like they should be at like the same level, the tops of the socks, I mean. And then they also kind of will do a droop down. I guess there'd be a whole like elastic portion up here, and then they droop, 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 which is which sucks because I did all of this. I did all of this, and it's gone now. But it still needs to basically exist because depending on her movement and what have you, um, it's going to be like, oh, it like swung this way a little bit, or it swung the other way, and like when do we see the actual anatomy of like her legs, and when do we not? And I think actually I'm going to undo this. Start saying this way because the way they work is that they do go into like they do have like an end that's like a sock cinch cuff, and then they droop on top of that, but it's not that we see any of that. I kind of assume it, like I'm picturing it where it's like going over the top of the shoe as well, but this became more of a like drawing than animation thing. I was just trying, I was just going into this like image. It became like a whole thing. Get rid of the rest of this because it's gonna muddy the waters. So now that we have like more of an idea of even like the shape that I'm gonna go with the character, I can like work with it. So this is like the stuff I do at all times, because to animate is to really understand what your character is at a form level, right? Like how big is the head? What is the shape of the head? Um, what building blocks make that character, right? Like, is it this plus like a triangle kind of nose? Are they got like a beak nose? What kind of shape is like the mandible or like the jaw? How much, if at all, is the recess that makes the eye? How much is the like cheekbones? So now it becomes something we can really like recreate at different angles and rotations. How big are their eyes? Oop. And so I'm like, oh, okay, like how do I even like break down that character? And so anytime I start animating something, it's a lot of me figuring it out before even really getting into it. Even though I like have a concept of what I need to do, and that's why this program exists, because you get to be consistent with things because you get models and puppets, and you don't gotta fiddle with. Is that working? You got a thing that's already locked in. And also this gives an opportunity for like, I seem to be noticing that there's like a design on this that's like an upside down heart, but there was no like, the only reason I know that that exists is because like I can see it in the rough, but it doesn't seem like there's ever an opportunity to see that. So it's like, why even, like, if you're not going to see a thing, you might as well not even bother putting it in, because like it's literally never going to be seen. So what's the point? Unless the assumption is like, we don't know that we don't see it. And then she's got like what I am assuming is like a scarf, but I don't really know. Maybe it's just her, like it's a turtleneck. So I wouldn't have it go like all the way around her head, just because. I mean, I guess it could like it could be any kind of a thing, but again, if anything, what you're doing is like you're having it be like big and then small, right? It goes like, but you're doing like a very small separation of that. It's like big, small. and then her head is like coming out of that, right? But I guess, I mean, like, that's not wrong. It's not a wrong way to do it for sure. It's just I have a feeling that I want it to be like going bigger at the bottom because of all the uh, because it's the same thing with everything else, that the gravity will be pulling it down, and you'd get like more of a wrinkle at the like bottom, and then her head coming out of that. I'm honestly not sure. It's mostly like a stylistic thing. And it's just hard for me to conceptualize because I'm trying to think like how does that work into the rest of her sweater? Because effectively at this point, with her being chibi and the front opening implicitly being so big, she's wearing like one giant tube. Like the hole that is the top of her head is equivalent to the body shape, you know? So I'm just kind of like, how's that whole thing not just like coming off? It's like such a baggy sweater and then has like the whole, it has no neck portion. It's just a hole. It's just a hole. Like it's a tube. And sure, she bunched up the top portion of it, but it's just a tube that has like an elastic at the bottom. And then it has sleeves that are baggy. Right? Like that's like implicitly the thing. So basically she like has no shoulders. And for hair, like you need to think of that three-dimensionally as well, which is to say they should be segments. So like bangs are like a front segment, you get like a side um, section. And when you think about it like that, that way it's not just like one flat shape, you can layer them and it communicates more. So now we know, oh, it's like the front. And so like when she like ends up turning her head, you can have like the bangs layered over top of like the side, which will like, is it above or what have you of the ear? Probably we'd still be seeing the ear to some degree. And then like what's behind her ear. Now you can have like the section that's like all the back of her head. And I would keep the top basically flat-ish to where her actual like skull would be to a point, because or at least like where they end up. So you'd have like, oh, this is the skull basically, but then it can like poof out from there, and then get like crazier, like kind of near the ends where they can wick off. But that keeps it like these little implications make it go, oh, okay, like that's where her skull is, and that's like her anatomy, and not so much like hair makes things ambiguous and basically confusing. Wait, I forgot. This is an anime character. That means they need to be like mostly forehead. He has like a bob. AC just like slightly turning on and off. Oh wait, I know why. I'll be back. Good. I wonder if my sound was going through that whole time. And so yeah, but we would see none of that. She's got like all of this sweater fabric. Older. It's just a lot. Somewhere in there's got to be a neck for like child torso, which is then very covered in sweater. Yeah, it's supposed to come down. Legs from a side view have this like interesting thing where they are like big because you got like a lot of muscle on the front of your calves, and so they kind of look like this, and a knee. But the opposite happens with the lower part of your legs because like the front is like literally just bone, and then all the muscles there are like at the back, and so you get this like this kind of thing happening. This is obviously like extreme, but if you had like a like very muscular person, that like it literally do this because that's when this muscle is like so defined. And like this becomes really defined in like female characters because like often they'll be wearing heels that are like made to like pump up that jam, because by standing on your tippy toes it like you're using that muscle a lot. I really suck at drawing shoes. In this case, her arm or hands would be like inside the sleeve. Which would kind of be my preference. Is like go ham with it, sort of a thing. So it's just a hard thing. So there's this problem, I guess, that occurs with chibi characters and cartoon characters that have like this sort of proportion in general, is that it is done because it accentuates like face animation and it's like interesting. Um, and there's probably other reasons, but it causes a lot of problems because, for instance, what if that character needs to put a hat on their head or pat themselves on the head, or, you know, because their heads are so big and their hands are so small in that form of design and perspective proportion, they literally can't reach. Like their heads are so big that they're like, oh, let me just put the hat on, and it's like, huh, huh, and their hands like or arms like end here, and their heads are also so big, so they literally can't reach the top. And a lot of those cases, we cheat, and like their hands like grow for that moment to like put it on, but Chibi doesn't have that conceit because it's not meant to be slow. But I mean, like they do. That's literally what they do. There's like no other way to do it. Um, all that being said, there's like certain things you gotta like avoid when like doing chibi. And so I think um, having like a like something big out here, like if anything, I'd have this be a whole separate thing where it's a scarf. Just because like it as the top of her sweater, it just like doesn't really work. It could be a scarf, that could be what you're doing, but in which case I'd have, excuse me, I'd have like it trailing like behind, right? So like she's this way, it's gone this way, and in the opposite pose, it would be like this way while she's the other way, because it's always trailing behind. But it becomes a very like that would be a very complicated thing to trail because it needs to move in like a flow state. It needs to be like what, and then what, what, and then kind of flow back the other way. So it becomes a very complicated thing. It's a fundamental project in animation, but it's just like a whole thing. So, anyways, that whole long conversation, all just to be really figuring out her form. I was drawing her all, I guess, here. And so probably you're seeing me do all this like description of like anatomy and building blocks and what have you, and you're going, I've seen animators animate. They don't do any of that shit. You're a liar. You're a filthy liar. Get out of here, you filthy liar. And to that I say, that's true. I do lie a lot. And very fair and good assessment, but not in this case. In that what you're seeing other animators do is like that's them having done this for so long that they now intrinsically understand it and they apply it to everything they do, essentially like in their head and behind the scenes. But you as someone who's like learning, this is what you're going to be doing until you know it, until it also becomes an intrinsic thing for you. And it's not even an intrinsic part for me. I mean, it is once I work with a character for a while, but it isn't defaultly for any character. And that's almost um, that's like a good trait for me to have as an animator because it means I'm very versatile. Any show that I work on, I can go, okay, let me figure this out real quick, and then okay, and then it's a bit of a struggle for a while with that character, and then I get it, and then they're like, hey, you're never gonna work with that character again. Hope that didn't like fundamentally define you as a person, and your art style has changed forever as a result. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, yeah, I guess I'll just be a fully different person now. So she's gonna go over. Depending, well, if this is like the extreme, then her hand is actually gonna be up. The thingy's gonna be up. Except that I she's going to be holding the thing, so her hand's going to be up, not so much the fingers, because they are holding onto her like sweater. It's going to be trailing behind. She is twisting through the body, which is to say her upper body is a profile. Her hips are probably going to be like at a 3/4, but her feet have not moved. Unless the idea here is that she's been like dancing, like I said, like that could have been the intention. In which case that's fine, but then she'd have to be like taking steps, step, while like doing it. And it's just like another thing to add for her to go side to side, which like that could be the thing, like that could be the motivating, the motor of the movement. But that's a different thing, and I'm not assuming that that's what's happening here. We'll do the simple thing first, which is she's just swinging her arms from side to side. Keep her legs like where they were. But they have to connect to this new place. So they're actually gonna be like layered now because her hips are a little bit more 3/4. Sweater was here. It will continue to be here, but we need to show as much as possible that she's like rotated through the body now. Well, she wouldn't have like a crotch. Well, she would have a crotch, but very deliberately we will not be seeing that crotch. And so she goes over. I'm kind of just thinking like what would happen with her skirt, right? Because like when she gets that end point, she's gonna sort of stop, but really it's that she like slows down to those endpoints. And I think the skirt will kind of like billow out from both sides because the rest of the time it's like collapsing, as though like you see something spinning. It's gonna like collapse as it completely envelops it, and then it's gonna pause and then billow out because it's going in the opposite direction. The only reason that's not happening to like her sweater is because I imagine her sweater is like weightier, and so it doesn't billow like how her skirt presumably would. It also might not. It's entirely like how you want to define the fabric and the weight of it and all these things. But by the looks of it and it being like ruffled like this, it's implied that it's a very light fabric, and so it would basically like billow out as it quickly tries to catch up to where it was, and it's like wrapping up. It's like wrapping up and then billowing out and then wrapping up the other way and then billowing out while it's doing a whole catch up. Her hair also would be like a whole follow through thing where it's like trailing behind more. So you'd have more of like the mass of it leading back. By back, I mean because she's rotating. This is like a harder concept to really define for a rotation because it's lingering behind, but in a 3-dimensional sense, it's lingering behind. So she's rotating this way, it's lingering this way, right? It would make much more sense if she was moving like across the screen, because then it would be like, oh, her head is here and her hair is trailing like with the movement of across the page or what have you. But because it's like 3-dimensional, it's hard for me to explain, but hopefully like it's just understandable because you understand it or you don't. It tends to be like that is a hard concept for people to like really grasp and make work until they've done things where they're doing follow through of it, like going across a page, and then you're like, oh, I know how to do it like that. So now I can like sort of bring it into this three-dimensional movement and what have you. And yeah, for antennae. So she goes, and this is the thing about like extremes like this, and for follow through, usually follow through is like a step after the fact. So you might, and this is probably the way I would suggest you work on this, is you can draw for these extremes all these billowy follow through elements like her skirt and her hair and her antennae. But easier is to worry about the major motions, which is like, how is the character rotating and how is the movement happening? So basically draw like a maquette of your character, like a puppet of your character that's bald and like pretty much like naked, but they don't have to be naked, right? Like, because it's just not going to like imply anything to like the final animation. There's no reason to really go into like the detail of the nudity is like what I'm getting at here. She's just like a doll, and so drawing like the rotation. So even like ignoring the arms, for instance, you could ignore the arms and just have her rotate from side to side. And notice while I do this, I'm dipping in the middle because that's just like it's a two-factor thing. It's a natural thing. It's hard for me to do like this, have my legs locked. It feels dangerous. So like if you bend at the knees, it just feels like a more natural and easy way to rotate. And it's just what we do to a certain extent. You know, we might do it at a small level, but we do it regardless. And so that's one reason to do it. Another reason is there's a principle in animation called squash and stretch, which is that things just look better, so to speak, for like extremes. Like if this was like a normal ball that looked like this, and then it impacted the ground as it came down, and it stretched as it bounced away, this really like sells its texture and its like material, because the level to which that it can squash and stretch implies, oh, it's a rubber ball. Or if you like super squished it, right? It's implied that, I don't know, is that thing like water? You know what I mean? Is that like a water droplet that that is splooshing before then bouncing off again, which like presumably here it like wouldn't even so much as it would be dead here. You know, so that like implies the texture of the thing. If it's like a bowling ball, for instance, it's probably not going to change shape at all, or like nearly not at all. You might change it slightly for like selling the action of it. So it's this. It implies the material, and also it's easier to read something that moves in this way. So when it's like rotating, and you just have a character, and it's like, hey, they start here and they end up here. Sorry that it's a smiley face, and they just move like this. You're like, you're like, okay, and it's boring. But if you squash them in the middle as they go across, it's more interesting and it's easier to see. Like basically you've given it more movement. You know, it's traversing more space, and as a result of traversing that more space, it's like more understandable. It lends to clarity in its movement, right? This is basically boring for the same reason that a character standing you know, arms out is boring. It's very rigid and like not human. So like there are bends to arm movements, and we want that with the arm swing as well. You're not going to have the arm swing because it's just mechanically impossible for the arm swing to be like, hey, I'm swinging my arm now, right? You swing your arm, it is in an arc, like for mechanic reasons, if nothing else. I'm going to have to edit this video so much because it's long and it's boring, I think. So if you're on the ground floor here watching this, good, because this shit gonna be gone. You're gonna get none of this. So because there's like a 3-dimensional rotation here, like I was saying, the hair that's like on this side of the head and like the back of the head is gonna be like seen on this side as she rotates. It's gonna like have a whole whipping effect around her head. So now that she's like here, right, it's still potentially trailing behind. But like I was saying, have them be a maquette, like have them be a puppet, and then add all these things on top of it. Because as you maybe have been like able to pick up on, even I'm finding it hard to articulate like where's her hair going to be at this moment, and it's because I don't know yet how fast she's going to be moving to get there, and like in what specific way she's going to be moving, where her hair was in the previous moment. So these are like wish fulfillment things where I'm like, okay, the hair might look like this, but it will look like however it looks like, however it needs to look like at that point to sell that motion. And I won't know that until I know that. So if anything, I'm kind of going, oh, the skirt is going to billow out like this. Might not. You know, the movement might not be like that. And so, like I said, I was going to get to timing, but I wanted these like major extremes first. I tend to at a very like entry level for anything, just go I just put my keys on tens. So I just go, it's on 1, it's on 10, it's on 20. That's just because there's these like nice little columns that let me kind of differentiate things. It can be anything. It could be frame 1, 2, 3 for all that matters. So one thing I'm going to do, this is just a technical thing. I don't need to draw. I don't think I need to draw her feet. The way this program works, this drawing is also this drawing. It's literally a duplicated version of the drawing. So the thing I need to do first is just hit duplicate. And so now, if you see like all the different drawings I have, these are the same drawing, but they're 2 drawings, meaning I can change this one and not change the first one. Just because I need to flip this. And then I need to make sure her feet are in the same position, if that makes sense, right? Because we can see the red is the previous drawing. It needs to be at least like believable that her feet are gonna be like in the general area, because right now she's like more over this way, but I don't want to imply that she's like stepped, right? If I didn't do that and she was here, we've now done the opposite of what I was saying, where oh, like if you go across, there's like more movement, we can tell that something's happened. But now there's just going to be like a bunch of micro movements of her like being in the exact same position, but she's doing this. And if that's what the character needs to do, that's what the character needs to do. But she's not doing that. She's like moving and swaying from side to side. And that comes from like moving your body over like a pendulum. So keeping that leg position is important. And honestly, that might have been like a major kind of fix and need of your animation. There might not be like too much more that can really like say there. Stay to your base model. You know, don't worry with all the like fiddly little things of their clothing and whatnot. We usually leave that for like post animation. So you fully animate your character's movements, and then you go and do the follow through of like the skirt, the hair, the antennae, you know, her thick sweater and all these things. First, just animate like the character, which is to say like the box, like you know, her as the character. Box and pelvis and like the legs. Her head and like obviously the arm, because that's like the whole animation, right? first do that, like get it working, get all of the frames that you need done, make sure the movement is like exactly what you want, and then do the follow through of the frilly things, like after cleanup even. Because that way you know exactly how she's moving and how much force she's putting into that movement. And that way you know how much force and movement the follow through elements are going to react to. Because they're reactive, you need that thing that they're reacting to, is the whole point. So, anyways, on to timing, which is the whole thing of animation. It just took me so long to even like get through describing anatomy and process. So we can maybe turn off the reference now. Do I do that? Go away. It's voice activated. So I have to literally say that out loud to get it going. So if we look at it now, we have these two things, and also we're going to need the middle again. So I'm just going to put it here because she's going to have to return to, like I said, the beginning, and we'll put that here. And then I'm going to move my timing to include that. Include that. Okay. And then we'll watch it as is, and we'll even turn it on to loop. So we'll see like how it feels as a loop. It's good. I'd say it's still slow, I think. I tend to have like a bad kind of sense for timing, but it kind of doesn't matter because the way frames work in animation, especially if you're trying to keep it on twos, which is like the more efficient, less laborsome way to do things, which tends to be the way I want to work, surprisingly. You're stuck in like factors of frame rates. You'll see what I mean in a second. Because you're doing twos, it has to be like divisible by two. But she does feel like a bit slow for this. And also I think I'm maybe want to like bring her arm more up when she like goes from side to side. Because right now her arm is like coming up like this. She's like, and again, like it could be what she do, but like maybe we want more. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It just feels small. It feels small to me right now. So it's kind of like a nice position for the arm, though. It's like a silhouette and all this, but I do want to get it away from like her baggy sweater, if anything else, because it's going to have a better silhouette, which means like if all of this was all blacked out, it would read clearly, which is what you want. You want the silhouette to always be the clearest it can be in terms of like posing. This is still copy pasting, right? Okay, good. So yeah, I like that second one, the second pose more. So I think that's telling me like I do want this higher. I would also recommend, since we're kind of doing this already like inherently, keep to rough animation like this like as long as possible for while you're posing and whatnot, because you should be figuring things out like this early on. What happens when people do like a really finished animation or frame really early on is like, oh, that drawing looks great. It isn't any of the frames I can use, but I like it. So I am going to force it and I'm going to make it fit in there. And then you're going to have bad animation because you have already something that you're stuck to, like you're forced to use, and its service is nothing, but you're like, oh, but I drew it so well. Yeah, but it sucks, dude. It's like it's also like 1/24th of the draw of the thing, so like no one's even really gonna look at it. Why does it feel like when she goes here? I guess I didn't. Yeah, it's like to be over more. And also I need to flip this because I've implied things. Oh, I forgot about drawing all that. I need to flip all this because I've implied some follow through stuff, and um, they're in reverse. Oh, but I didn't duplicate you, so it did it to both, and that made it pointless, which is just like such a fun thing that this program does, and I definitely love it, and it's never wasted my time, and it's always been good that things work like that here and nowhere else on this whole entire planet. Yeah, I love that, actually. It's one of my favorite things about this program. So yeah, it's like okay timing, but it feels a bit slow, but it's kind of hard to tell because there only are extremes right now. But let's assume that this is ultimately going to be the frame rate that we go on. I'm still going to have to break this down. Like mentally, I'm going, I want this to be a little bit faster, I think. And let me just see what it is that I like, how I would need to break this down in terms of timing. And so if those are extremes, right, I'm going to have to go from here to here. This middle one is negligible. If anything, we might lose this middle point. Now I'll explain why immediately. So timing wise, when we're talking about timing, we mean where are the drawings going to be at what frame? And when we talk about ease in and ease out, actually, I can explain this better with a pendulum, which is what I wanted to do. So if you had a pendulum moving, and this is the pendulum, right? And right now it's at rest, so it's not moving. It's perfectly down and in the center. But you had that pendulum go from side to side. So it's nice that we're doing like this kind of animation because it really goes along with this pendulum concept, like very much hand in hand. And the pendulum concept is, I think, like the first thing you learn at like any animation college or something equivalent. And it has to do with the whole principle of timing. So if you have your extremes, let's say here and here, right? This is the highest points the pendulum will travel. How might you do the in-betweens? How might you do the timing, right? If we were to compare this to what we have right now, we have frame 1, we have frame 20, right? We have frame 20 and we have frame 10. How would you break it down? Right? Where would your other drawings go that end up being your in-betweens? Because we have like 9, 8 frames in between here because we're not including 1 or 10. So we have like 8 frames here. And we've got presumably 8 frames here. Frame, right? So what do we do with those 8 frames? Well, half of those are going to be held frames. So that really only leaves us like 4 drawings left if we do this on on 2s, which we might not, but just, just for the sake of argument. So we have 4 drawings we can put in here, and we have 4 drawings we can put in here. Where would we put those 4 drawings? So you will probably do this. You'd probably break it up like even form, which at 4 frames is it's annoying. Let me just tell you, because I'm going, where the hell am I going to put 4 frames? I know I want 4 balls, and that I, in this example, would want them to be equidistant. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I want them to be equidistant, and notice, like, it's hard to do so. To make them equidistant. But beyond that, spoiler alert, I guess, this is not what you want to do. But this is what everyone does, because you don't know timing. Why would you know timing? I'd be surprised if you knew the right way at this point, because this is usually like the assumption of anyone learning animation to start, unless you've just learned otherwise already. If you're like a person that's interested but has no knowledge. So if you were to like play that, it would move bad. Let's say it would move uniform in a way that is not conducive or does not take into account gravitational forces like inertia and gravity. And so what is a more realistic timing, and this is where we get ease in and ease out, which I was like alluding to before. Right, is actually, we're going to remove the middle one as well here. That might be what we have to do with this as well, but I'll explain in a moment. And so instead of, actually, I want all of you, because I'm lazy and I just want to like copy paste things. So this would be our this was the bad timing. But we want things to spend more time at the far ends, right? If I just like go to my full can. If you have a pendulum or anything kind of like going to both ends, an equal timing movement is like this. This is going to be hard for me to like perform. It's going to be like this. No. And that's like not how a pendulum works, if that makes sense, right? A pendulum would work like, actually, let's do this. Let's actually like get this thing and see if it pendulum. Will it pendulum on today's episode? Right. It kind of is impossible to tell actually on the screen. It's so tiny. But the point being, it spends more time on the extremes, right? And it goes fast through the middle. And that's because it's taking that energy and it goes up, and it's basically expended that kinetic and gravitational energy at the top, but it needs to expend it, right? It has a fight with, this is inertia and this is the energy given, but gravity is like pulling it down and therefore over because of the tether. And so it's expending energy, and it has this battle where it's like, okay, I'm getting, like, I'm expending and I'm losing energy. And so it has an arc where there's a fight here of inertia, and then gravity ultimately wins and pulls it back the other way, which then gives it energy and pulls it back. And so you get this like waveform of like loss, but actually the waveform is like, because it had a lot of energy, it lost some energy, it lost some energy, right? It doesn't have infinite energy. This isn't sci-fi or what have you. But obviously, it can go on infinitely. We don't need to think about the exponential loss of energy or anything here. Just that it needs to have more time on the ends. So how would we show that? And so the like easiest way to do it is to keep the middle point basically just for the sake of like having a middle point as like a reference, but that should be the place where we move fastest. Wait. There we go. That should be the point where we move fastest. So first of all, let's get rid of that, right? And already this is better, but only like if we take into account the rest of the things that we're going to do. So we're going to be moving the fastest in the middle, so we want to get rid of that. And we want to spend more time at the end. So we want to bring all of these over to the end. And so how we do that is usually by like constantly dividing by a half. I was going to literally just like do it, and you can have it be like an exponential growth, but then you will be guessing, and it needs to be mathematical in a sense, but you're never going to have to do math really. It's just a matter of like dividing things in half and half and half and half. So what I tend to do is like, and you've maybe seen these if you've seen a lot of like rough animation, like behind the scenes on Blu-rays and whatnot. You'll get like, you know, I've got my extreme pose and that's on like frame 1, and I've got my next pose, my next extreme pose is on frame 10. This is why keyframe animation is also helpful, but you can basically do this in straight ahead. You just have to be like knowledgeable that this exists and working towards those points or what have you. So you're going to start at 1, you're going to go to 10, and you know that you want it to like start a bit slow, move fast, and then like really really slow down, you know? So notice we're at the fastest kind of here. We started slow and then we ended slow, and it's the fastest here is what I'm trying to describe with this, where the more something is horizontal in this description, the faster it is, and the more it's vertical, the slower it is. The reason why I describe it this way is because it literally looks like that in most kind of, I have no actual animation in here in terms of the math that this thing is looking for, but this would look like those graphs, which is why I'm describing it as such. So yeah, in this case, it's kind of doing like, I don't know, 30, 70% or something like that. Like ease in, ease out. Right? That's what like this would describe. And what that means is it's kind of starting slow. It's like starting slow and like building up inertia and force, and then getting pretty fast through the middle, because it's basically like caught up to said force and speed. And then it needs to stop at the end. And so it stops at the end through like more slowdown. So instead of just going like it needs to go to that endpoint, just like stopping, you know, steady speed stop, which is very nothing at all moves like that, except maybe like a factory machine, and even in those cases, maybe not. So you want it to have that slowdown at the ends. So we would just always divide it by half. 10 is actually like a bad example because it's not going to be anything like that in terms of like your frame rate. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So it's probably going to be 9 if anything. So we'll call you 9, like frame 9. So what you might do is have like a midpoint that you would designate. Even I'm going like, how do I usually like break this down. You want this to be like the 7 frames that are going to be in between this are going to be 7 frames, 7 like dashes, let's say. But you want them to be like moving an exponential smaller form. So let's say I have like a midpoint here, kind of arbitrarily, because in this case, we're going to do something like this. So it's going to be even on both sides. So we will have a middle point just for the sake of kind of breaking things down. But that's not going to be a frame I use ultimately. And then it's going to be even on both sides. So we're going to go perfectly middle. But still we have perfectly even timing, right? It takes just as long, or there will be just as much like movement, like just as much space as this to this to this to this as all of these, right? This is all equal movement, equal timing. But we want an ease out. We want preference on these ends. So then, okay, we have a midpoint here and here. So now there's starting to be preference towards the ends. However, these are now very evenly timed. And so it's still going to be like even timing. And if I included this middle frame, like even timing, but at a faster rate for a smaller point, and then even timing again, but at a different rate, like grouping into different rates, which is still not nice. So then we would break it up further. And then in this last little bit, I'd probably preference it to be not the middle, but like a little bit more in, right? And that's like the way to conceptualize it. And so now if we were to actually break this up, is this actually enough things? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? I think so. So this would be frame 3, 5, 7. I guess I didn't like count the 2s. 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17 in this case. And I think these two are kind of fine, but usually you want to very specifically not have the center point. So if I wanted this exact timing, I would need 18 frames, including like the one that this would need to be held for. I would need 18 frames to do this much movement for this pendulum, right? So that's what this visualizes. So the end frame here would be like 17 in terms of like the frames that I need to draw and work with in frame 1, but it would be 18 frames of like animation to include that one held frame if I was doing on 2s. But it could be different timing, right? Like this could be less and more. It could be like 5 frames total or what have you. And you can always do it as such to break it down, where you just keep doing like halves and halves and halves. And basically, when you have keys and extremes, you're thinking about what extremes do I have and how many frames do I have like available, because usually you get like, this is how long the scene is. So you already have something you got to work with. And so you can go like if it's 5, and then you can just like start to break it up. I want more down this way, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this case. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is like kind of a weird breakup. And so usually I want to break it up where I have like a perfect center and then like a center. And the reason, like they're always divisible by themselves. So this is like a perfect center, and then this is a perfect center, and then this is a perfect center. I usually want it like that, because then I don't have to like do any math or awkwardness. So when you saw me do this pendulum, it's like, right, I had this extreme and these extremes, and now I have to fit 4 in here. At what point is 4? At what point is the middle of 6? Well, like it's here, but that doesn't help me, you know, because I don't have a middle thing. If I did have a middle thing, it'd be pretty easy to find. And so that's why we like to have things be the middles of things and basically have animation be like at the smallest form on like on threes, or so you have like your extremes, frame 1 and frame 5, and then you'd have the in between of that, frame 3, because that's just like a very easy in between to find, right? So if we had this be in the middle again, we got rid of all this, and now we're trying to do this timing, right? We have this middle point, which is 9, and we have to find the other middle points. Okay, well, the middle of these two is here. That's easy. It was easy. Man, animating's so easy. Who told me this was hard? So easy. So now we have that middle point. And then we want it to like reference these endpoints. We want it to slow down at the ends. So we find the next midpoint. And then we want it to slow down further. So we find that next midpoint. And this is the point where I said, well, I don't want like, I want to break up the timing a little bit. So I'm going to prefer it a little bit more to that end point, that actual endpoint. So that's not perfectly the center. It's slightly more over, because that's just going to lend itself to that slowdown and break up my timing. And that might be wrong even. I'd like watch this and I'd go, does that even work? Or do I actually want it to be like the proper division? And so you'd have something that looks like this, and you should have something that looks like this when you're doing like a pendulum style animation and like anything that's easing. And it could probably even go further, right? Because this doesn't necessarily need to be on twos. You could have yet another one in here, which is like just slightly before the very end. And in this case, it would work the same as it comes backwards, right? Like it's not just going out to the far ends. As they come back, it would be this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one, you know, all the way over. And then it would do this time, and then the same timing backwards, because of the way it like is losing energy and also building up energy. But it could be different. But it do be kind of like complicating things for no reason at that point. So we want the same thing with her timing. So what would her timing be? You might have one timing that's for her body, and then like a different timing that's ultimately for her arms. And really, that is the way you should be doing it and have it. But you're not there yet. That's why I was saying, hey, maybe you just do her torso rotating and doing like the beat, and then you do the arms on top of that with their like own timing, because it's more naturalistic and more betterer. But it's also more work, and I don't think people are there yet. We already have the middle pose, so like that's just like an extreme that we're going to need. And then I'm going to want to have an in-between breaking that up, and then an in-between breaking that up. And you can see that I'm not doing literally the center. I'm doing like one a bit in. So this is, I would say, the minimum frames that we would need, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the minimum amount of frames to do from end to end. Yeah, from one extreme to another extreme. And then basically that's going to happen again if we're doing just the minimum. So she's going to go from like extreme to extreme to extreme, or key if you want. Right? So this is like the full left side, like she's swung to the left, she's swung to the right, she's swung back to the left. And what's going to happen is at the end, we're going to get rid of this one frame, so that it ends here. And when the animation loops, it loops here, which is where we want it to be. So that way it becomes like a perfect loop. So this is going to look like frame like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Oh, I understand what I was doing wrong now. I had the like count correct, but not the frame. Like there was the amount of drawings I would need to do with 7, but not the frame that we would have ended up on. 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25, but like again, we're getting rid of that, so it's going to be exactly 24, and this is going to be 1 second to go from side to side. Like I said, this was the minimum amount of frames that we want, and I think this is actually going to make it fast. It's going to make it too fast, basically, because if I do this, isn't that what? Isn't it though? Okay, you weren't doing it, and then you started doing it. What was it that I said? You get to the other, so you would be at 7, you'd be at 7, and you are at 7. And the other extreme should land on 13. $19 and $25. Right, and then I'll just do like this. No, there we go. And then we'll get rid of that last frame, and by rid of I just mean it's now not going to play it. It stops here. So when I play it, it doesn't play that last frame. And it could totally be this timing. I think that's fast. So I wouldn't suggest it. But this is like the minimum framing that we would have to do to kind of like break this down. But let's break it down further. So we'd have, so this, in that case, like this could be the center, just because that's going to make it like easier to find those in-betweens. So what I'm doing, what I'm articulating with these little graphs is what does the spacing look like? But ultimately, these are sequential, right? If you're looking at this on the timeline, they're gonna be even down here. It's a matter of the spacing of your drawing, right? Like how much distance they traveled is what I'm trying to communicate with this. So yeah, so an in between is like that's when it's a ball or a pendulum, it's pretty like yeah, it's in between the two things. But when you have something complex like a girl swinging her arms, it's like where's the midpoint of all of that, right? And it's a lot easier to understand, like literally just draw the middle of where those two lines would be if they were moving in this way, than it would be to like that's a lot more complicated than a pendulum moving and finding that in between. So doing this kind of graph is just like hugely beneficial to figuring out timing, but it's also hugely beneficial in just understanding how that movement is working. And if you can break it up in these halves and halves and halves and halves, then you're making your life exceptionally easier. So, and then we'll just add like another set of extremes, which is going to add like 4 more drawings, which makes 8 more frames. So it's like 8/24 of a second, which breaks down to like 4/12 to 6s, 1/3. So it's like a third of a second added. Okay, so if I go for each, from you to the middle, it's going to be 1. So 1, 1, 1, 1. And then my timing is going to be here. which is pretty much what we had before, just a little bit faster. And I think that's good, timing wise. And then just to end on, like, let me explain what I mean when I say like an in between, because this is why we want the onion skinning. We want the reference of the before and after. So I am going to want to do the in between that's between, like, we have this is the frame we're currently on. Okay, this is this. And this one is the previous frame, right? It's this one. So I am finding the visual middle, which is this, right? But it's not the middle of the timing, it's the visual middle. Middle, right? And that's the one I would do next. And so I'd create an empty frame. And I'm going to move it later, obviously, but you can have it be anywhere. The reason I do it here is because my brackets show the reference of both places. And I got to look at my previous place and go, okay, her arm was here and it's ending up here, right? So in this middle, I'm trying to find where that is as a perfect middle. And I might even think about, yeah, it's moving backwards, but her arm, like her upper or her lower arm, is going to trail behind a little bit. So it's not going to be straight. It's going to be like this. But to what degree, I'm not exactly sure. I just know I want it a little bit. And that's why, like, I'd want to keep things a bit rough, because I'd want to try it on, basically. But as you go, you're going to figure out stylistically like how you like things. You might want to do stuff like literally draw the arc of the movement to see that it is in fact moving how it needs to move, and also that you're keeping proportions correctly. Because as you do this, you're going to want, oh, okay, yeah, it's going that way. But I don't want to like shorten the arm too much or what have you. And so while doing this, you might want to have cleaner extremes, but maybe not at this point. We're still just doing like roughs, because usually when I'm doing in-betweens, proper in-betweens, it's cleaned up enough that I know, like, okay, that's a line and this is a line from before and after. So my in-between is going to need to be like exactly there. Like usually, but it's a good cheat, if anything, right? So I'm kind of just going, oh yeah, they just need to be like in between these two places, hence the term in between. But that's understanding that I've set up everything in such a way that it is exactly like where I would have wanted it and moving how I wanted it, which is really like assuming a lot. So she's starting to like move backwards. These are going to like settle slash like overshoot basically to the other way. Draw just in between where things are for those onion skinned layers. I'm not gonna block it with the feet because they're like off screen, but it was still very much a good thing to have. There, and I don't have her back arm like visible, but I can assume that it was like off screen. It's going to end up here. So it was like maybe kind of like this, like behind her before. So now I'm going to want to find the middle of that, and it's just going to remain straight the whole time, because unlike the other one, I can't so much bend from this angle, right? And then I'll just like delete it because I was just kind of drawing that as like a reference. And then I'll move that to be the same placement, like where I need it. So this is going to be literally the frame just before, and then it's held for 2 frames. So it's one drawing, and then we hold it for 1 frame, and then it switches. Yeah. I was like, wait, why doesn't it ease in? But that's because it's the middle, and I don't want things to ease in at the middle. It's the middle, you know? It's not something we're going to focus on. And then you keep doing that. Right? So now we got to find the middle of that new drawing that we did and the next one over. So then I'll go new drawing. You see me like scrubbing through, as it's called. It's because like I'm trying to see if the movement is working like how I want, or even just to see how is it moving, like to reference to make this new drawing. Right, so I'm looking at her arm right now, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I want it to go from this place and end up in that green zone. Right, so elbow, 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 shoulder, shoulder, shoulder. So I want the new shoulder to be here. The shoulder has started to like out, but basically in this way, we're kind of going backwards in time as far as like the drawing is concerned and the animation is concerned. So where her arm had already, like this back arm had already kind of poked through, here it's still mostly behind her. Like somewhere, basically, but I'd have it a little bit visible, like just because that way it's not just popping into view, but instead is like slowly coming into view. But that could be wrong. That could end up being not something I want, but that's just a generally good idea, having something not rapidly pop onto screen. So right now I'm just going like green is forward, and I drew this like little bit. So I'm gonna want a little bit of that still, I think. This is all follow through stuff, so you know I'm like 100% gonna change it. Putting the crosshair to like figure out where the center of her face is, but that's presuming that this is like a rough. I probably would have had her facial features done at least. Like I wouldn't have included all the um, follow through elements, like all the floaty secondary action objects, but I would have had like included a face. Like I would have already had her face, I think, in here. But yours didn't, and I'm not like presuming what she looks like. But yeah, I would have already had the face, and so I wouldn't have like the crosshair kind of face thing that everyone does. So much as like I would actually put in the face. whatever the hell she actually looks like. Because the face is like not the movement unless it is, but usually it's more of a constant. Sorry, there's a knocking that is not anything to do with this. So like the scrubbing still keeps the onion skinning on, but if I turn that off, you get like a better sense of how she move. And then our final in between for this like section. And this why animation takes so long, because this is still just the rough. And I talk so much. So much. I did so little. How dare I? We got places to go and people to do. So this is where I want more of a preference towards like the starting position, right? Like if we go back to our timing, I wanted like it's middle, but like this is more preference to the beginning. And the reason why I kept like saying that is because here, this is actually like a big difference. And I don't want to do the center, right? I want it to preference where it started because I want this to be an ease in. I want the arm to move slow as it starts to get into that next pose and so forth. The upper arm could probably be like more of a middle. This lead behind, I want to be more on the like end of the arm because that's what's catching up. And then for like the hair here, I'm really just keeping it in the same position because what's gonna like visually on screen the same position because what's gonna happen is like it was there and then she moves, but the hair basically is staying behind. And what you might even have happen is like in this frame just before it gets into this like big changeover, right? This is quite a big movement for it to do. And so there's a thing called smears, which is where you have essentially what would have been like multiple frames of animation on one frame. And the reason why we do that is because there's such a quick move. It's motion blur, right? It's like it's moving so quickly that the camera, so to speak, is capturing many frames on that one frame because the movement is so quick. The way I like to think about smears is that if it's a mechanical object that isn't very bendable, it's very rigid, then I would have multiple frames like you see on screen right now. But if it's like an organic object or something malleable, then I do a smear. So a smear is like what it sounds like. So if you look at like old Looney Tunes cartoons, it's like where you use dry brush and you do like speed lines and what have you. And you might have aspects of like the multiple frames in there, but they're kind of more like hints at the big motion that's happening. So now I have like multiple frames implied, at least, as she's got like this big arm, you know, that's coming across. So she might have an arm that's looking like this. I don't know that we'd have like so much in the middle, but like we might break it up. We might have kind of what looks like vibrating lines at the edge. And it's really like defining that movement and like defining the shape that it's like moving on, the path that it's moving on. And so the thing about smears and this like frame blending technique is they should always be on ones, because you're never really supposed to like register that they exist. Having said that, it can be on twos for the sake of this, because it just don't matter that much. It is a rule of thumbs that it's always on ones, because you're supposed to keep it like a secret. So now that we're done that side and that it's a loop, I can use these for the other side. Right, so I can just like take this frame, put it here. Right, am I wrong? Wrong here, wrong. So I had to explain a lot to get here, but like the actual to do of doing this is not a lot. It's just I'm trying to explain why you would do that so that you can use it for anything else. And you're not just creating this one thing, but you can create anything that has eases and in betweens, and just like do just so much more with animation in general, right? And I'm not going to bother with the other in betweens. It's more of the same and following exactly what I just did, but in this way. So if yeah, if you found that helpful, let me know. You know, comment, subscribe, all of those nice things. And let me see what you utilize this for. You know, if you're doing this trend, let me see how it ended up. Because like, even if you're like following along and trying to get this exact thing done, right? I only did it to here. So like, what would you do for these other in-betweens to complete this whole like blank middle? And what would that look like? And yeah, put it up on like your YouTube or whatever and send it to me. Let me know. I'm like happy to review other people's work. If you want to be a student of mine, my Patreon is in the bio of like the page, and I do these kind of like reviews for my students all the time. And if you want to see this kind of content more, subscribe. You know, you're an adult that's living in this time period. You know how it works. Subscribe and like and bell and give me money, please. Thank you. Okay, bye.